An intern could do this, he said, grinning like he'd just invented the concept of air. Then, click, he muted me. My screen froze on Carter's smug face, framed by the kind of LED lighting only people who've never done real work think looks professional. Whole Zoom room went silent like the damn rapture hit mid-Q2 forecast. You could practically hear the intern in finance choking on his breakfast burrito. So that was it. 16 years of regulatory firefighting, data lockdowns, midnight calls to Luxembourg, and writing compliance frameworks so bulletproof they once got cited in an industry white paper. And I'm getting canned on a Monday by the founder's overcooked trust fund in khakis. Not even a one-on-one. Not even the dignity of letting me unmute to say go to hell with the poise I've been sharpening since 2009. Nope. Just silence. Then a chirp from HR Slack. Hi, Julia. Please drop off your badge and laptop when convenient today. No exit interview needed. If this is your kind of twisted office drama, hit that like button, tap subscribe, and toss some sympathy into the algorithm so our little storytelling team can keep unpacking these corporate car crashes for your listening pleasure. Seriously, 90% of y'all forget to subscribe, and it's colder than our break room fridge in January. Anyway, back to my downfall. I logged off that call without saying a damn thing, closed my laptop like a tomb, and just sat. I could hear my neighbor mowing his lawn through the window, completely unaware that a man-child with a PowerPoint fetish had just detonated my career from a standing desk. I made tea. Not the good stuff, just the bitter black bags you keep for guests you secretly hate. It fit the mood. Then I packed up. My badge, still on the lanyard from last year's data summit. My company laptop, riddled with sticky notes like archaeological layers, Q4 audit backup, Client B breach protocol, do not delete, EU temp keys. I left it all in a neat pile on my kitchen table. Drove to the office with the AC blasting like I was trying to freeze the rising nausea in my chest. Didn't cry, didn't rage, just rolled in like any other day, parked in my assigned spot, walked past the receptionist who couldn't meet my eyes, and rode the elevator up like a ghost. HR handed me 2 pages. One was a termination summary. The other was a tech checklist. No severance, no NDA, no mention of transition planning. No idea, apparently, that the logins they just reassigned to a summer intern were tied to more legal triggers than a CIA honeypot. I scanned the forms, signed with my backup signature, loopier, more dramatic, makes legal nervous, and said, I assume legal signed off on this, before sliding the pages back across the table. The HR girl smiled. Yep, Carter wanted it done fast. I nodded. Then fast it is. Walked out without looking back. Didn't even keep the mug from my desk. Left that too. A souvenir for whoever was dumb enough to think GDPR was just a European spelling of annoying. Back in my car, I sat still for a second. The silence was luxurious. No pings, no 2 a.m. Slack messages, no panicked data officer whispering about implied consent verbiage. And for the first time in years, I wasn't responsible. Not for them. Not anymore. I turned off my phone, poured a shot of vodka into my now empty teacup from the flask I keep in the glove box. I'm not proud, I'm prepared. And I waited. Not out of bitterness, out of curiosity. Because Carter had no idea what he'd just pulled the plug on. And I knew exactly what was coming next. The badge slid across the HR desk with the soft finality of a coffin lid. No, thank you for your years of service. No awkward cupcakes. No forced group photo by the lobby fern. Just me, the junior HR associate. Poor thing looked like she still used glitter pens, and a busted Keurig hissing like it knew something was about to catch fire. She tapped on her keyboard with the kind of overcompensating cheer people use when they're silently begging the floor to swallow them. So, Julia, just a quick tech checklist and acknowledgement form. Shouldn't take more than a sec. Carter wanted everything wrapped today. Wrapped. Like leftovers. Like I was some moldy compliance meatloaf they forgot in the break room fridge over Memorial Day weekend. I glanced at the exit form. 2 pages. No severance, no transition plan, nothing from legal, just bullet points. Badge returned, laptop accounted for, access credentials to be transferred. Transferred to who, exactly? Right on cue, a guy in cargo shorts walked past the HR window, holding my laptop with both hands like it was radioactive. Tyler, the intern. I'd trained him 3 summers ago. He once asked me if our GDPR reports were, like, for marketing or something. A wave of disbelief passed over me so fast it almost made me laugh. But I didn't. I signed. Slowly, clearly. with my alternate signature, the one that curls at the J like a noose. Quick question, I said, laying the pen down. I assume legal signed off on all this? The HR girl blinked, her smile faltering. Yeah. I mean, Carter said it was all good. So not legal then. Just Carter. I stood, picked up my empty travel mug, and gave her a nod. Then we're done. I walked out like I'd just mailed a bomb. Calm, deliberate, already imagining the ticking that no one else could hear. Because here's what they didn't understand, and what Carter, in all his Harvard-like brilliance, couldn't possibly have known. My credentials weren't just for show. They were embedded, legally, in every consent record, every compliance key, every international data transfer protocol that crossed our servers. My digital fingerprints were the damn gate code. Stripping them without a proper offboarding? That's not just sloppy. It's federal. I drove home slow, like I was pulling away from a crime scene I hadn't committed yet. By the time I got inside, my work Slack had already deactivated. Email, too. They were fast, I'll give them that. A little too fast. No one thought to forward anything. No one reached out for a handoff, or a contact list, or even the location of the secure backups I'd password protected with a failsafe clause only legal could override. I microwaved a burrito, watched the cheese bubble like it knew a secret. My cat, Calvin, batted at my elbow, demanding his 11 a.m. treat like clockwork. He was the only creature in my life whose routine still made sense. Just as I sat down, a ping echoed from my personal phone. Signal from a former coworker, Dave from infrastructure. Hey, heads up. Carter just asked in the all hands if GDPR applies to us. Tell me this is a bit. I stared at the message. Then another ping. Rachel from legal. Your name's still on the DEA contact list? He didn't mention anything about transition. And a third, this one anonymous via Signal. Please tell me someone changed the keyholder registry before you left. Nope, no one had. Because I had built that system to not be easy to change. You don't hand nuclear codes to an intern. You don't swap out the custodian of record on 3 years of transatlantic data contracts with a shrug. There are forms, reviews, audits, timelines, whole federal guidelines for this crap, and they'd bypassed all of it. For speed, for streamlining, for ego. So I made a cup of tea. The good stuff this time. Loose leaf Assam I save for moments when the house is silent and the storm hasn't hit yet. Then I sat. Not anxious, not angry. Just still. Because they didn't know what they'd done. But they would. Oh, they would. By noon, my phone was vibrating like a toddler after 5 Capri Suns. First message was from Dave again. Carter just asked if GDPR applies to us. Please tell me this is a joke. It wasn't, but it was a punchline. A very expensive one. Second message came from a paralegal I used to mentor. Hey, did they update the DEA contact? Because your name's still in the registry, and there's a request for signature pending on the compliance server. I didn't respond, just stared at my cup of tea, slowly steeping, turning darker with every second like a bruise developing in real time. Deleted Slack. Not out of spite, out of mercy. For me. For the part of me that had already walked away and didn't need to watch the house burn from the front lawn. The truth was, I'd seen this storm forming 3 months ago. Carter wasn't subtle. He came in all chirpy LinkedIn buzzwords and synergy acceleration. Started asking questions like, why is compliance such a cost center? And do we really need separate signatories for EU data? That's when I'd started my little side project. See, years ago, during a particularly nasty audit cycle, I'd proposed a protocol system. Every data transfer, every regulatory touchpoint, every legal backup documented and logged in a living chain. Verified, time-stamped, password protected. It was supposed to be a way to protect the company. But I'd added a twist. A small legal footnote buried in the access framework. Any removal of the custodian of record without transition acknowledgement and signature by counsel constitutes a breach of compliance protocol under Internal Rule 9G. And that footnote? Signed and approved by the founder himself during the peak of the Cambridge fallout when everyone was terrified of liability and throwing signatures around like confetti. I opened the file, local copy, encrypted of course, and checked the logs. No access attempts, no edit requests, no forwarding metadata. They hadn't even opened it, which meant no one had transitioned me out. No one had changed the records. And the moment the intern, or God help us, Carter himself, tried to sign off on anything regulated, the system would log the attempt and trigger a chain reaction. The kind that ends with a red flag on an EU regulator's desk, or a delayed response that counts as intentional noncompliance, or a ping to the DEA saying their registered point of contact no longer exists. That's the thing about data law. It doesn't wait for you to understand it. It doesn't care if your dad started the company. It only cares that the person listed on the paperwork is reachable and authorized, which I no longer was. Another ping from someone in client relations. Julia, did you take the backup access list with you? The EU client portal just went into failover mode. Nope. I didn't take anything. It just followed me out the door because it was all built with my name in it. You can't patch over that with a new login and some duct tape. That system was a cathedral of bureaucracy, stone by stone, clause by clause. And Carter had just knocked out the keystone. A third message, no sender ID. There's a consent framework expired warning on 3 client dashboards. Is this tied to your exit? I took another sip of tea. It tasted better now. In the quiet that followed, I stared out the window and watched a crow land on my fence. It tilted its head at me like it knew something. Maybe it did. Crows are smarter than Carter, after all. I'd spent years keeping the threads tight, the protocols clean, the paper trails bulletproof, because I knew that someday someone would get cocky, would cut corners, would think the quiet woman in the corner office was just another bureaucratic checkpoint instead of the entire damn firewall. And now that day had come. And I didn't have to do a thing. Not anymore. Because the system was already ticking. At 10:47 a.m., the fuse lit. The intern, Tyler, bless his khaki-shorted heart, initiated a routine internal audit run through the compliance console. Probably because Carter told him to check for redundancy metrics, or whatever corporate Mad Libs he'd scribbled on his whiteboard that morning. That audit pinged our auto-compliance bot. Something I'd built years ago with a contractor from Prague who ate pickled eggs and coded like he was hiding from Interpol. The bot, named Grace, short for General Regulation Automated Compliance Enforcer. Yes, I made it an acronym because some of us still have pride. Scanned everything. Timelines, signatories, consent timestamps, all cross-referenced against the central authorization key, me. Except I wasn't there anymore. So Grace failed. Loudly. It didn't just log an error. It launched a level 3 internal alert, flagged a discrepancy, and triggered a cooldown on all data processing requests flagged for external jurisdictions, which, for a company servicing 38% of its clients in the EU, meant shut it down. At 11 a.m. sharp, a processor from our Munich client office called the main line in a panic. This is Nico Weber. We've lost legal grounds to access our data mirror. The token has been voided. Where is Julia? I wasn't there. He was transferred to legal, where the junior associate on duty told him someone named Tyler had assumed signatory status. You've assigned an intern? Nico barked through the speakerphone loud enough to rattle the glass walls. Is this some kind of compliance joke? Do you understand what a revoked consent token means for our operation? Spoiler, they did not. Meanwhile, IT started getting slammed. Emails bounced, remote access keys failed. Scheduled file transfers returned denial messages stamped signatory invalid. One system even spit out a report with my full name at the bottom, followed by authorization missing. Verify custodian of record. No one could verify, because no one had transitioned me, because Carter had muted me and then strutted into his day thinking he'd conquered the beast by unplugging its mouth. Calls poured into the CFO's office next. Client after client reported unacknowledged transfer of consent. That phrase, so dry, so technical, might as well have been a stick of dynamite. It's the exact phrase regulators look for when someone tries to swap data custodians without documentation. It signals either gross negligence or intentional obfuscation. Neither option pairs well with Carter's little streamlining initiative. The CFO, Annika, was no fool. We weren't exactly close, but we respected each other. She once called my compliance logs paranoid art. Now she was getting the performance. She called Carter. No answer. She called legal. They were already triaging a dozen emails with subject lines like urgent, withdrawal of data sharing, and immediate review required, breach notification pending. By 11:12, the panic started bubbling into the open. Departments CC'd each other blindly, legal jargon clashing with IT shorthand. Someone from sales had the audacity to reply all with, "Can someone just override the signature and reassign it?" Bless their soul. That's not how any of this works. In the break room, people were whispering. You could feel it, the tension blooming through the air vents like black mold. Carter was still in a closed-door call with a potential investor, smiling like he wasn't sitting on a compliance grenade with a chewed fuse. And me? I was at home, folding laundry. A documentary played in the background, something about shipwrecks and hubris, and how ancient mariners ignored storm warnings until the ocean decided to swallow them whole. Seemed fitting. My phone buzzed again. Rachel from legal. Just one line. This isn't survivable without you. But it was. Just not for them. At 11:17 a.m., someone in legal finally cracked open the regulatory vault I'd left behind. It was probably Rachel. She always read the fine print. The one who flagged a semicolon inconsistency, once that saved us a $200K renegotiation. She'd gone silent the past couple months. Carter didn't like people who talked in full sentences about risk. But now, she was digging. What she found wasn't subtle. It was surgical. My name was everywhere. Everywhere. Custodian of record on EU consent frameworks. Keyholder on our deferred enforcement agreement with the U.S. Department of Commerce. Lead signatory on 5 cross-border data transfer protocols. Emergency override on the anonymization watchdog system. And not one of those designations had been transitioned. No signatures. No acknowledgements. No legal review. Nothing. It wasn't just negligence. It was corporate suicide written in courier font. At 11:22 a.m., a partner law firm forwarded a formal notice. Pending regulatory breach under Articles 27 and 28 of the GDPR. Access to EU citizen data must cease immediately. Continued processing without an authorized representative constitutes criminal liability under EU law. This is not a drill. That last line wasn't legalese. That was panic, professionally formatted. Legal scrambled. Rachel hit up IT. IT looped in compliance. What was left of it, which was apparently just Tyler and a 6-week-old onboarding checklist. Carter? He was still in a meeting 2 floors up talking about infrastructure elasticity and minimizing operational drag. He was pitching investors, selling his shiny restructuring initiative, completely unaware that half the company's client infrastructure was now radioactive and the other half was poised to follow. Word started leaking. Someone in product whispered it to marketing. Marketing told HR. HR pinged legal in a panic. Did we miss a required form during Julia's offboarding? Her name's still in all the frameworks. No, sweetie. You didn't miss the form. There was no form. Because Carter didn't believe in paperwork. He believed in vibes. And then my phone rang. It was the founder. His name still popped up in my contacts as Old Man Volcano. A joke from a decade ago when he'd storm around barking at people for thinking like cowards. He once called me the only person in this building who knows what a consequence is. But I didn't answer. Let it ring. Watched the name flicker across the screen and disappear into voicemail limbo. Because I knew what he wanted. I knew the exact expression he was probably wearing. Brows drawn, glasses pushed up, eyes doing that slow blink of someone realizing they'd handed a grenade to a toddler. He was probably sitting in his den, tie off, whiskey glass sweating on a legal pad, watching his legacy turn to mush because his son confused confidence with competence. Let him stew. Instead, I made another cup of tea. Rooibos this time. Earthy. Slightly bitter. Like the scent of resignation and quiet revenge. Back at HQ, Carter was laughing. Laughing. Told someone in finance that a few system hiccups are to be expected when you clean house. Said he was unfazed. Unfazed. That was the word. A man so far up his own delusion he couldn't hear the alarms screaming in the background. The legal team couldn't reach him directly. He'd silenced all internal notifications to focus. A junior associate had to slip a note under the conference room door during his pitch. He ignored it. Brushed it aside like it was someone's lunch receipt. Somewhere in a glass box upstairs, a bank of monitors showed red system lights blinking like Christmas came early. Grace, the compliance bot, was now in lockdown mode. Access was getting restricted in waves, like a firewall closing in real time. And I was barefoot, sipping tea, watching a crow chase a squirrel on my backyard fence. No smugness, no malice, just satisfaction. The kind that comes from knowing you set the fuse 6 years ago, and they lit it for you. At 11:20 a.m., the domino tipped. The automated GDPR system, good old Grace, reached her threshold. After failing to verify a valid custodian of record for over 1,800 data records and watching 2 unauthorized access attempts logged under Tyler's credentials, She executed her last resort protocol. Breach reporting. The system compiled all flagged entries, compiled cross-jurisdictional timestamps, and automatically submitted a breach alert to the European Data Protection Board. The message was cold, factual, and, most importantly, compliant. Custodian of record, unavailable. Unauthorized data access, confirmed. Transition protocol, absent. Regulatory breach, declared. Attached were 14 supporting documents, each bearing my name, and now each marked revoked without legal transfer. At 11:25, Grace's sister script on the U.S. side, because I never trusted a single point of failure, sent out a different alert. This one landed in the inbox of the Department of Commerce's Compliance Monitoring Division. It flagged our deferred enforcement agreement. Remember that gem? The one that let us skate through a mess in 2018 with the understanding that I'd remain the legal point of contact for any further issues. That clause had a little time bomb, too. If I was removed without counsel present and without notice to the department, enforcement would proceed. The notification subject line was blunt. Enforcement trigger. Custodian of record removed. No legal handoff. And just like that, the house went dark. At 11:28, security buzzed up to legal. There are 2 SUVs pulling into the lot. Government plates. Looks like federal. The receptionist, Hannah, fresh out of college and 2 weeks into the job, stood up from her desk and stared through the glass doors as 4 people stepped out. No hesitation. No confusion. They weren't here for a meeting. They were here for orders. At 11:30, 2 agents, one from Commerce, one from the Federal Trade Commission, walked into the lobby with printed documents, badges visible, energy sharp enough to slice drywall. "Who is the acting compliance officer?" one asked, voice like gravel over steel. Hannah stammered. I think... Carter? Where is he? In a meeting, upstairs, pitching, investors. They didn't wait for an escort. Up they went, boots thudding on polished tile, jackets swaying, papers tucked neatly in black folders like scalpel kits. Back on the operations floor, the phones were chaos. Sales was in flames, clients calling nonstop, panicked, confused, demanding to know why their data access had been revoked mid-cycle. 2 major vendors had already frozen transfers, citing suspicious authorization patterns. And someone in HR was frantically trying to reset access credentials to correct the issue. Spoiler, you can't correct a bomb after it's gone off. Carter's voice, still booming from the glass meeting room, could be heard saying, "And our new lean model eliminates deadweight like redundant compliance checkpoints." Deadweight, redundant. That's what he'd called it. What he'd called me. And then the door opened. The agent stepped in, presented the enforcement order, and didn't even wait for his mouth to close. "Effective immediately," the taller one said. "You are to cease all operations involving protected datasets. This includes client-facing portals, back-end analytics, and all third-party processing flows. You are out of compliance and under investigation." The room froze. One of the investors, some guy in an overpriced watch, whispered, "Is this a joke?" "Nope." Carter tried to talk, of course. He always talked. "But this is just a misunderstanding. We've reassigned everything. It's under control." The shorter agent cut him off. "You removed a federal point of contact without legal oversight. You violated a deferred enforcement agreement, and you gave access to an uncredentialed intern." The last word echoed like a slap. Back at my place, I took a slow sip of tea. Same cup, now lukewarm. Calvin curled at my feet, purring like he knew Mom had won something. The silence was beautiful. No dings, no buzzes, just the hum of justice syncing itself with reality. They'd asked for a world without me. Now they had it. And it was collapsing. The boardroom was all glass and ego. Carter was mid-slide, pointing at a pie chart titled Operational Efficiency Post-Redundancy Reduction, when the door opened and security stepped in. "Mr. Carter?" the guard asked, voice low but firm, like a bouncer who knows the DJ isn't stopping the music. "You need to come with us." Carter blinked, still holding the clicker in his hand like it had magical immunity powers. "Excuse me, I'm in the middle of a—" "It's urgent," the guard cut in, already stepping forward. The board members shifted in their seats. A few exchanged glances. One old guy from the audit committee coughed and muttered something that sounded suspiciously like, "Jesus Christ." Carter followed the guard out, confusion spreading across his face like a sunburn he hadn't felt coming. Downstairs, the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. The agents weren't saying much. They didn't have to. Their badges said more than words ever could. Enforcement orders, printouts with my name on every page, internal logs time-stamped to the minute, system failures tied to him. Then the lawyer arrived. Joanna had always moved like a metronome, precise, measured, just a little faster than everyone else. But this time, she was running. Heels clicking across the marble, coat half on, hair pulled into a knot that was starting to fray. She burst into the lobby, breathless, took one look at the agents and said the only sentence that mattered. Did she sign her off-boarding papers with legal? The taller agent didn't blink, just handed her a file. She opened it. One glance. Her lips parted just slightly. Then she turned. Slowly. Deliberately. Eyes scanning past Carter, who had just entered the lobby, red-faced and breathing like he'd been jogging uphill with a backpack full of bricks. She looked past him, to the founder. The old man stood near the elevator, arms crossed, shoulders sagging under the weight of what was clearly about to unfold. Joanna walked up to him and didn't lower her voice. "Please tell me you paid her," she said. "Not did you pay her out? Not did you finish her transition? Not do we have her on retainer? Just, please tell me you paid her." The silence that followed was thick enough to chew. The founder didn't respond. He just closed his eyes. And in that gesture, the whole boardroom's oxygen got sucked out. Carter stammered something. No one remembers what. Probably tried to explain how we've reassigned everything and this is just a hiccup and we're streamlining operations. But none of it mattered. Not now. The agents stepped in again. "Operations must halt immediately. Access logs are being reviewed. You will receive subpoenas. This is not optional." Joanna stared at Carter like she was mentally calculating how long it would take to fire him without violating HR protocols. And he looked like a kid who just realized the glitter he dumped on the rug was made of ground glass. From the mezzanine, employees were peering over the railings, phones in hand, mouths covered. The whole building had turned into a spectator sport. You could almost hear the internal monologue of every bystander. Carter's cooked. She warned them. They didn't listen. And I was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my living room, folding socks, reruns playing in the background, the faint clink of Calvin's collar tags the only soundtrack. My phone buzzed again. No ID. Voicemail transcription popped up. "Julia, this is Joanna. I know you're probably not interested in talking, but the board would very much appreciate a conversation. There may have been misunderstandings. Please call me." I let the screen dim. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was finished. They had their answer, and now they could sit in it. By noon, the office was a graveyard of blinking monitors and silent phones. Operations ground to a halt in 3 major departments: data services, international compliance, and client integrations. All of them tethered, delicately, invisibly, to systems I'd built. Or more accurately, systems named after me in every registry that mattered. With my credentials revoked and no legal transition on file, those systems didn't just slow down. They locked up like a bank vault during a blackout. Key clients, big ones, the kind with multi-year contracts and legal teams that wear 3-piece suits on Zoom, started pulling access. "Out of compliance" was the phrase that kept echoing across inboxes like a death knell. A German insurance conglomerate suspended 2 data feeds. A pharmaceutical client in the UK revoked processing permissions and flagged the incident to their regulator. One longtime American partner, quiet and ruthless, froze payments and triggered a clause no one remembered existed. The emergency board meeting was called at 12:17 p.m. Attendees, founding members, legal, compliance remnants. Joanna, looking like she'd aged a decade in an hour, and Carter, wearing the same tailored shirt from his investor pitch, now rumpled and sweat-soaked under the arms. They didn't ask for his opinion. They didn't ask for his defense. They asked for his badge. Temporarily, of course. Pending full review. The HR language was polished, but the message was clear. You screwed up. Spectacularly. From my end, it came through as a push notification from an old security tool I'd set up years ago, one that logged system-level access changes from senior leadership. Alert access modification. Carter Dawson marked as inactive administrator. I sat back in my chair and let that little dopamine spike wash over me. Brief, quiet, clean. Then the voicemail hit. Blocked number. Female voice. Clipped, formal, tense with apology. Hi, Julia. This is Stephanie from the board. I don't know if you're seeing the news yet, or hearing from anyone inside, but there's been some, well, movement. If you'd be open to a conversation, the board would very much like to, well, apologize, and potentially discuss a consulting role. Discretionary, flexible, on your terms. On my terms. That's cute. I didn't even hit play again. Just tapped forward, sent it straight to Marcy, my attorney. She was a pit bull in pearls, and she'd been waiting for this all week. I imagined her hearing that message, sliding her chair back from her desk, and smiling like a hammer about to meet glass. I didn't reply. Didn't text. Didn't so much as draft a maybe later. Because this wasn't a rescue mission. This was after the fire, and I wasn't stepping back into the wreckage to help them sort charred bones from paperwork. They'd had every opportunity. They could have consulted legal, could have transitioned credentials, could have asked a single simple question before Carter decided he was smarter than the systems holding their entire operation together. But they didn't, because arrogance doesn't ask. It assumes. And now they could enjoy the silence I left behind. Back at the office, the elevators were locked down. Visitors rerouted. A compliance review panel was scheduled, and 2 outside firms were brought in to assess systemic process failures. No one said Carter's name. They didn't need to. Everyone knew. The building, once so full of buzzing Slack channels, clinking mugs, and keyboard chatter, was a mausoleum of misplaced confidence. And me? I reheated my lunch, fed Calvin half a can of tuna for being an emotional support menace, and opened a new folder on my laptop titled Retainer Discussions. Justice doesn't always arrive with fireworks or fists. Sometimes it just calls, politely, and waits while you hand it to your lawyer. The conference room was silent but for the hum of the HVAC system, pushing cold air across a table full of paper ghosts. Joanna sat at the head, sleeves rolled, jaw tight. Her paralegal stood behind her, eyes glued to a thick file folder that hadn't seen daylight since the pre-pandemic compliance review era. The founder was there too, hunched over like his chair had aged with him, and across from them sat Carter, deflated, tie askew, face drained of the smug color it used to wear like war paint. No one spoke. Until Joanna did. "We missed something," she said, voice flat. She didn't look at Carter. She looked at the folder. "This," she continued, opening it with surgical precision, "is your former employee's contract. Julia Greer, Director of Data Compliance. 16 years of service. Impeccable record. Minimal turnover. No HR flags." She slid a page free from the back. "And this," she said, placing it face up on the polished wood, "is her addendum. Executed in 2021. Risk mitigation phase. Signed by legal, compliance, and..." She turned her eyes to the founder. "You." The founder didn't blink, didn't flinch. Just sighed, slow and quiet, like an elevator descending through a collapsed shaft. Carter leaned forward, trying to understand. "What is it?" Joanna didn't soften. "A clause. Inserted during a routine policy review after our last audit scare. Drafted by Julia. Reviewed, approved, filed." She tapped the clause with her pen. "In the event of involuntary termination of the undersigned without presence or involvement of legal counsel during the offboarding process, including but not limited to document review, credential transition, and role dissolution, the company agrees to a contractual liability payout of $2.7 million USD to be rendered within 30 days of breach." A pause. The kind of pause that kills careers. "Did you," she asked, still calm, "have legal present when you fired her?" Carter swallowed. "No. I didn't think it was..." "You didn't think." She turned to the founder. "Did you authorize a carve-out to that clause?" He shook his head. "Once. Slow." "Did you know your son removed the only person legally binding our DEA compliance agreement from all systems without oversight?" Another head shake. The founder didn't open his eyes. Joanna looked back to Carter. Her voice stayed even, but now it had teeth. "You've not only triggered a multi-jurisdictional breach investigation, endangered our regulatory standing with 3 agencies, and cost us 2 top-tier clients. You've also personally activated a 7-figure payout clause." Carter blinked. "It's enforceable?" "Oh yes," she said. "Ironclad. It was buried because no one thought we'd be that stupid." The document sat between them, Just paper, ink and language, and power. Not the loud kind, not the shout in the boardroom, fire off a slack thread kind. This was the other kind of power. The kind you build in silence. The kind you plant like a landmine, then wait, patiently, for arrogance to step on. Joanna pushed the file toward him. You'll sign the disbursement order today. The board won't fight it. There's no appetite for a lawsuit, and frankly, no chance we'd win one. Carter stared at the clause. His hand hovered over the document like it might bite him. The founder finally spoke. Just 3 words. I told you. Nothing more. By 4 p.m., the wire was initiated, and by 4:10 I was sitting on a park bench under a canopy of orange leaves, watching a golden retriever chase a wind-blown leaf like it owed him money. Calvin sat in his carrier beside me, grumbling like the old man he is, while I sipped my latte and let the breeze tangle my hair. My phone buzzed once, then again, then a 3rd time. I didn't look, didn't need to. Apologies. Offers. Desperate explanations. They could wait. I'd already gotten what I came for. Not the money, not even the clause. The silence, the consequences. The understanding that just because someone muted me didn't mean I wasn't still listening. And now, they were the ones sitting in silence.